in negotiation is the biggest mistake people make in negotiating is, I'm sorry, my Siri picked up my conversation. All right. So the biggest mistake people make is disclosing prematurely. And the other thing is allowing your phone to go off and Siri to talk to you in the middle of a presentation, which just happened. Okay, so avoid premature disclosure. Okay, the second thing, let's talk about traditional negotiation. There's a term called BATNA, which is the best alternate to a negotiated agreement. You've probably heard this. If you've read a book called Getting to Yes, it's kind of like the Bible of negotiating. It was written in 1981, and it talks about a BATNA. A BATNA is it's your fallback. So for instance, if you were selling a car and you already had an offer for $10,000 for your car, that's your BATNA. So you're negotiating to get more than that for your car. You already know you have something in the bank. You already know that you have something you can fall back on. That's your best alternative. So now you're going to negotiate, but you always have your fallback position. So whenever you enter into a negotiation, you need to understand what's the bottom line that you can't go below. That is your BATNA. So in traditional negotiating techniques, they talked a lot about having a BATNA, and that is still a valid point, a valid type of negotiation. So you need to understand, in addition to your research on whoever you're negotiating with, understand your BATNA. Now, there's another more modern type of negotiation, which is called best and worst case. Now, my reference on this is a great book that has been written recently. It's called Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss is a retired FBI negotiator. He's the guy that would negotiate with people for $1 million, and he'd get on the phone and they'd say, "Give us $5 million or we're going to kill your son." And he's the guy that the FBI would bring in to negotiate. And you can read his book. It's highly recommended. There's all kinds of different negotiating techniques in there, but one that I've picked out is the best and worst case. So what he argues, and I agree with him, is rather than putting your attention on a BATNA, which is the lowest common thing that you can't list, establish a range of acceptable options. So establish a range of, okay, I can do this contract for as little as 10,000 and as high as 20,000, say. So you've got a range, right? But instead of focusing on the BATNA, you want to focus on the high end of the range. And then you want to discover with your people, with whoever you're negotiating with, what's acceptable and what's not. Now, one thing I advise people to do, and I deal a lot with salespeople, that's my number one business, is find out from whoever you're selling to if they hire outside vendors. And say, by the way, do you have a corporate attorney? Okay, and what do they charge you? Or do you have a CPA firm that you work with? What do they charge you? Or do you hire outside consultants or outside contractors? Okay, now that's establishing in your mind, in their mind, what is acceptable. So if they tell you that their corporate attorney, they're paying $450 an hour, okay, and your pricing is somewhere a little bit lower or higher, then you know that you're in the acceptable range. You can always push on the top end of the range, but establish the range of options before you enter into the negotiation. Okay, now some key points. Lose your assumption. In any kind of negotiation, you want to avoid prejudging, avoid assuming. And I'll never forget, in my corporate career, we called on a very, very large, probably the richest company in the world, headquartered in Arkansas. And we were selling a $4 million computer. They invited us into their corporate boardroom. And in the corporate boardroom, there was a ratty old table, 10 chairs. There was no carpet on the floor. There were no pictures. It was just almost like a prison room. And that was the corporate boardroom. And the reason they did that was to intimidate their vendors. You're sitting in the room and you go, I'm going to ask $4 million from these people. Obviously, they can't afford any of this. But come to find out, they're the richest company. And at that time, they were worth about $350 billion, headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas. So that should be a clue. So they were trying to do a negotiating tactic. They were trying to make the people who were selling to them make an assumption. And the assumption is, my God, these people can't afford the price that we're going to be asking. So therefore, we need to reduce what we're asking. So in a negotiation, you need to lose your assumptions. In a the world had an assumption, for instance, that it was impossible to run the mile faster than 4 minutes until 1954. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. And after that, 8 more people that same year broke the mile. So the world made an assumption that that was impossible. So when you go into a negotiation, you want to make sure that any assumptions you have about them are thrown out. Because if you're assuming that they are only interested in marbles, or if you're assuming that they're only interested in baking cakes, okay, that will fixate you on that point. That assumption will drive, and it will also create a blind spot. So be very, very flexible. Lose your assumptions. Okay, a very famous quote by Carl Jung: "What you resist persists." Now, I deal, like I said, a lot with salespeople, and one of the biggest things that people resist, think about it. What do salespeople resist? They resist losing. They don't want to lose the deal. So a lot of times, rookie salespeople will go into a call, and they're going, I got to get this deal to make my budget. So they're resisting, and their very resistance pushes people away. So the resistance creates a problem. So what do we resist? We resist our own strong emotions. We're in a sales situation, or we're in a negotiation, right? And somebody says something that really sets us off, and all of a sudden we're angry. We're reacting. We lose track of what our negotiation point was because we've lost it. Okay, so in any negotiation, what you want to do is don't resist. Allow something that comes in. You must, to be able to be effective, you must understand their viewpoint and where they're coming from. So the classic is they tell you in a sales situation, they say your price is too high. And oftentimes salespeople will say, they will react with fear. They will react with, how do we handle this? They will not understand exactly what the person means when they say that. I'll give you an example. We talked about the solar industry. It's an industry that I have a client in the solar industry. And one of the things that I was doing was listening to their phone calls to find out why they were losing some deals and to fix it. Well, a typical example, I've got a salesperson on the phone. He's listening to a client. In the middle of the conversation, the client, and this is actually recorded, the client says to the salesperson, he says, I don't understand why your price is too high. I just can't afford you guys. You're just way out. There are other people that are cheaper. Okay. So what does the salesperson do? The salesperson, instead of going in and handling that and handling the objection, he reacts with a negative emotion. He takes the position, he just ignores. He says, well, let's talk about blah, blah. Let's talk about, well, let me tell you what you get. Let me do the, he switched the conversation and avoided dealing with the issue at hand. So he was hit with a negative emotion. He was hit with fear. And also in his mind, he had a hard position. His hard position was he wanted to have a certain price. He was not willing to negotiate. And so when somebody said your price is too high, all of a sudden he froze. He had a fixed position. He was not willing to pivot or look at other alternative fashions. He wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to be flexible. So flexibility in a negotiation is absolutely essential. Had he had he responded as I trained him to do, had he responded with, what do you mean? When you say your price is too high, how high? How much more? Let's talk about that, right? He would have found other available options. He would have been flexible and he would have been able to move and find an acceptable answer. So flexibility in any negotiation is absolutely critical. Okay, and I think this is my final slide. Jay, how am I doing with time? Am I pretty much on time? I can pause and ask for questions here.
You have about 10 minutes, so we got some time even for some Q&A.
Okay, got it. I wanted to make sure we had that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about pan-determinism. Has anybody here seen a brilliant movie that was on Netflix called, actually it was a series, it was called The Queen's Gambit?
Yeah.
Anybody seen that? Okay. So in that movie, the heroine of the movie, I forgot her name right off the bat, the heroine of the movie was able to assume both viewpoints. Now, there's a difference here. When you're playing chess, you choose one side or the other. You choose the black pieces or the white pieces, and you play one side or the other. So you're being self-determined. You're playing for yourself. You're competing against somebody who's other determined. They're playing their side, right? So you have two sides competing with each other. What would happen if you could see both viewpoints simultaneously? If you were willing to see both sides simultaneously. So, for instance, chess masters, including the gal in the Queen's Gambit, they have the ability to play both sides in their mind. So in the movie, she would project mentally both sides, and you could see her playing the chess game. You know, this move is made, that move is made, this move causes that, and she could project 5 moves, 10 moves. She could play the entire chess match in her head. She was willing to see both sides simultaneously. Now, what does that have to do with negotiating? Well, in negotiating, a very, very powerful technique is to see the other side. So if somebody is saying your price is too high, or if somebody says, well, we like your contract, but we want to get rid of these 3 elements, or we like what you're proposing, but except, well, you need to understand the world from their viewpoint, right? So if you can see their viewpoint and your viewpoint at the same time, you probably will be able to figure out a way to come up with a mutually acceptable conclusion. An example of this, I was coaching a friend of mine who had asked for a raise. He went to management and he said, I need a raise and I need it now. And I need, a raise of $10,000 a year. And I need that right now. And they turned him down. And so he came back to me and he says, I said, well, what did you follow up with? And he says, what do you mean? I said, you just asked for $10,000 and they said, I was very firm and I demanded it. I said, okay, what happened? He said, they turned me down. I said, okay, did you find out if there are other options? Did you find out what their salary review process is? Did you find out when their budget takes place? Did you find out a few other things, right? So I gave him some very simple questions to ask. Come to find out that there was money in the budget to give him a raise, but just not right now. It was another 3 months after, at the beginning of the year. So had he asked that question, had he been willing to see that they had a problem paying him a raise right now, but there was an option to pay him a raise in 3 months. All right, so the idea here is if you are able to be pan-determined, you can see both sides, right? So therefore, you can focus your attention not on people, right? You can focus on the mutual areas, the things that we share in common, and then you can come up with what I call a win-win situation. So the top of the slide that I have, the top slide on negotiating, it says, let someone else have your way. Well, that's true. But the other side of it is, let's both of us have our way. So if we're able to, the problem with going for just winning is you risk losing a relationship with a potential client, a long-term relationship. So you may win a short-term negotiation, but you may lose a long-term relationship. If you take advantage of a short-term situation where you have all the negotiating cards, so you're going to negotiate to the limit and get your absolute best price, and to heck with them, well, you may lose a long-term relationship, because what happens when things shift and suddenly they have all the negotiating cards? So I'm a real fan of doing a win-win situation so that both people come out of a negotiation feeling very good about the negotiation and that it was a success. Okay, so those are the key points. So let's just recap. Avoid premature disclosure. Don't blurt out a price until you're ready for it. Be aware of having a BATNA before you go into a negotiation. Make sure you're prepared to understand your best and worst case scenarios. Try to avoid making assumptions or judgment about whoever you're negotiating with, right? Be aware that you must be flexible and you must not resist. If somebody says something that you really disagree with, you have to understand what they mean by that, because your reaction is not going to do you any good. And then try and see things from both sides. Be pan-determined over the negotiation, and you'll suddenly find out that your results dramatically improve. Okay, so let's pause. I think we've got a few minutes. Are there any questions? You can.
I've got a couple hands up.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Sid?
Yes. So, Pat, I'm in an industry where we provide securitized institutional quality Class A offerings to investors. And these offerings have a fixed offering price. Now, when we meet with clients, we have a discussion on risk. We have a discussion of their needs, wants, all of that. But sometimes it comes down to the investor saying that, oh, you need to give me a break on the price, or you need to give me some of your commission back. And let's say the guy is investing $5 million and he wants, 1% or 2% back. So how do you deal with these type of people where there's really no flexibility on the price, and you really cannot give away commissions? It's just a very tough situation to be in. And the hard part is you're thinking, well, the guy has $5 million equity to invest, and the only reason why I'm working is because I need to feed my family, pay my kids' tuition, and he still wants a cut of my commission. So, how do you just, yeah, I would love to be in that guy's shoes, but I cannot really see myself being in that guy's shoes when he has, $20 million worth of real estate, and he's investing $5 million with me, and he still wants, $10,000, $20,000, back, or $50,000 back as commission. So how do you deal with these people?
Good question. I get that all the time. The first thing is, in your discovery, is this a long-term relationship, or is it just somebody that you're just cultivating as a one-time client?
Well, every client starts as a one-time client unless and until you do repeat transactions with them. Actually, I don't even call them a client. That's a misnomer, because a one-time, someone who does a purchase one time is simply a customer.
Yeah.
The one that comes back and also refers their friends and family is the one that is actually a client, and who also respects your professionalism and does not look at you simply as a transactional salesperson who's just selling you something because you need to make a living. You know, obviously they don't respect you.
Right. Okay, a couple things. The book Never Split a Difference. Read that book. There was a simple question that he asked. The negotiators, he was on the phone. He was put on the phone as the FBI guy. And he was put on the phone, and negotiator says, give me $10 million or your son, we'll kill your son. So he paused. He didn't react, since it's not his son. I mean, he's the negotiator. But he paused, he didn't react, and then he asked a very simple question, which is something that you could ask, which is, how am I supposed to do that? And then on the other end, the negotiators said, well, you know, give us some money or he's going to die. What, you don't care if he's going to die? Da, 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 da. And then he asked, he says, well, how am I supposed to do that? And he says, for instance, he says, even if we were able to come up with that money, how am I supposed to do that? I don't even know if he's alive. And so he completely turned the negotiation around. Okay, so that's something that you can do. The other thing is, if they're saying, if they have all these assets and they can afford a $5 million investment, and they're qualified for that, then, you know, obviously it's just a negotiating tactic, right? They're trying to get the best possible deal, right? There's not emotion on it. They don't have to do that in order to, you know, feed their children, right? So that's just a negotiating tactic. So depending upon your relationship, there may be flexibility, there may be other things. There may be other options that you could offer. And I'd have to talk to you further about that. But there are other options other than price, the long-term relationship, the future business, the other things that you may be offered to them. There are other things that you could offer, other referrals. There are other things, doors that you could open, windows. They probably don't understand the value that you bring to the table and the value of the relationship with you, because if they did, they would realize that there's so much value in doing business with you that they wouldn't be so hard in negotiating. You follow? So I think it has to do with understanding their viewpoint and where they're coming from. It's obvious that if they could afford it, it's just a negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
And there's options that you can take. So I think we need to, I hope that handles
Sounds
it a
like an
little bit.
opportunity for a one-to-one right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love to talk
So-
to you
We need
about
to
that.
be in the troika.
Yeah, we only
Yeah.
have a few more minutes. So Bob and Carrie have a question up and Jerry does. So if we could get the questions, Bob, you were next.
Patrick, I just wanted to compliment you. This was a great presentation, and I want to encourage you to make this available in terms of an ongoing course, because none of us are as good as we should be in a negotiation. The people we negotiate with have already been educated. So when you take a course, and I'm very privileged, I produced Chris Voss, so I learned a few things along the way.
Oh, wow.
But he's one
Yeah.
of many people I produce in negotiation. The more you learn, the better you become. And many times it's exactly what you said. It's looking at the big picture and throwing out a question. How am I supposed to do that? In your case, Sid, you may have just said, why would I do that? And it just throws the opponent right off their game. So congratulations, and I'm looking forward to seeing you produce something in terms of the ongoing educational program that we can all benefit from.
Patrick, as a beginning, can we share slides with those that attended today?
Sure. Yeah. You have
Okay.
those slides. I sent them to you.
Yeah.
And
And I'll save them as a PDF, and I think you actually sent them to me as a PDF, and I'll put those out to the people that did an RSVP for today. And Carrie, you had a question?
Yeah, a great presentation. Mine is sort of question/comment. I think it applies to quite a few of us. Although I, always hope that a prospect goes with me because of my, charming personality and, 30 years of experience in my industry. I realize that in most cases it's a price situation. And so in my world, I typically have to get a proposal out almost immediately. And the idea is that you get that prospective client off the street. What in actuality happens is they take that proposal and they shop it.
Yep.
And if they're looking for best pricing, they've got that. So in my question / comment may be rhetorical. I don't know that there's a real great way to get around that. I love to negotiate. I love to offer reasons why somebody should go with me. Hopefully myself and my company offer something that my competitors don't. But again, in actuality, sometimes all people see and hear is this one's cheaper, this one's cheaper, this one's cheaper. Is there a magic phrase or word or solution that you use?
Yes, there is. You're on the cusp of price versus value. Okay. Anybody that's trying to beat you up on price, and this is a maxim in sales, they want a better price, right? They don't understand the value that you're delivering. Okay. So I have seen that exact situation. And depending upon who you're dealing with, you can say along the lines of tell a story. Well, we could go down the line of where I give you a proposal and you shop it around, and then you come back and you want a better proposal, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort on my part and your part. So why don't we cut to the chase? I will commit to you. I will give you my best and final offer. There will be no better offer if you will commit to me that you will not shop it around. Okay. So if you can get an agreement with them on something like that, right, then you can give them your best and final. Okay. Now, there's a caveat on that, because do you really want to give them their best or final, or is there still a little bit more negotiating room? Okay. But the agreement on their side that they will not shop it around is critical. Okay. And you can tell a story. You can say, what would you feel like if you made me an offer? Right. And I shopped that around to 10 other people, right? How would you feel about that? You follow? So you need to get a little bit more firm on, okay, let's
I do that a little differently in that I do a discovery call. And even if they ask me about price, I won't even address it. But after I understand what they want, then I say, look, I'm going to go back to my team and I'm going to put together a proposal just for you. And in 2 to 3 days, let's schedule 30 minutes. At the end of that 30 minutes, I need a yes or no from you. I don't care if it's yes or no. I'm okay with either one, but I want a yes or no. So whether it's you or if somebody else needs to be in the room, because I don't want you to say I need to talk to my attorney or my lawyer or my wife or anything else. Anybody that needs to be in there to be able to make a decision needs to be on that second call. And at the end of that 15 or 20 minutes, it's either yes or no. Because after that, you can't come back. You're not going to go out and shop it and then come back and say, okay, now a week later, I like your deal. No, the deal is on the floor until we end the call, and then it's over. And I tell them that up front. So I'm looking for a yes or no. I can't, well, let me think about it. I don't like making quick decisions. I need to sleep on it. No. When we're done, I need a yes or no, and I'm perfectly okay with either one, but I need closure at the end of that call. And oftentimes, if they really want and they understand value and you have a fair price, then you can close that. But trying to do it in a single call is really, really difficult because they do want to negotiate and they want to go back and forth. That's the reason I have a discovery call and then I have a sales call. I don't call it a sales call, but that's what I do. Yeah. And Jerry, you had something you wanted to share?
Well, I only want to say is, how does Sid arrive of this person that he's talking about? Was it through a referral or did he just walk off the street? Okay. So if he had a referral who really appreciated his work, that's one thing, okay? And this gentleman came within mind to negotiate the best deal he could get. The other thing is, I would not go forward with his negotiation at the time. I said, let me think about it. I'd like to get information about him, and if he has a company, who is this guy? Does he do the same thing everywhere else? And get a little more information, because if I make a decision, I don't want to do business with this person because they'll continue to ask the same question. Then I will just say, like you said, decide whether you're going to do a yes or a no. That kind of situation puts them at like, wow, I didn't know he was going to do that to me. anyways, that's my.
Yeah. Pat, could you quit sharing so I could get the screen back?
Yes, and just to respond to Jerry, the
Yep.
standard, when somebody says, what's your price and you're not ready, you say, I'd love to give you my price, right? And we'll get to that. But before we can do that, I need to find out more about you and your company.
Yep.
Correct.
All right.
And Mike Monteleone, the last question, please. We do need to get to
Okay.
Troika.
Yeah. First of all, Patrick, very well done, and you covered
Beautiful.
some really great bullet points that we all need to focus on. One of the ways, we always get asked cutting our commission. I mean, that's like a standard thing.
Yep.
And in order to cut through the chase, I usually ask this first question, and it's basically, what's most important to you? Having me cut my commission or netting the most in your pocket?
You bet.
And if they come back and say both, then I know I've got to explain, and maybe I can never turn them around. They're just looking for a deal. If I can create value and go through what I bring to the table, we get them off that topic. And sometimes they just testing the water to see if you will cut your commission.
Well, as they say, everything's negotiable.
Yeah.
So if they don't ask, it's almost foolish on their part. You just need to be ready with whatever the objection is. Nobody has a new objection. I've never heard a new objection.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you've heard them all. You just need to understand what your response is going to be.
And Mike, that's a very polished response. I
Yeah.
actually wrote it down, what's most important to you, because oftentimes people are just testing the water. They're
Yes.
saying, well, can I get you? And if you prematurely jump in and say,
Right.
okay, I can cut 1%, you've just lost the deal. They
Yeah.
weren't really insisting on it. They were just throwing it out to see what your reaction would be.
20%, I've kind of looked at the percentages. 20% usually will never do any business unless they get a great discount. And the other 80%, if you can bring value to the table, they'll work with you.
Sure. Yeah. The old 80-20.
Yeah.
All right. Patrick, thank you. That was amazing. I appreciate you sharing your slides. Hopefully all of you can see the Troika slide